Thank you for joining us for the Conform to Christ podcast, where we seek to engage the mind, affect the heart, and call people to follow Christ. My name is George Mays. I'm here with Jay Jones, and this is Text Driven Tuesday.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey. How's it going?
It's going better than last week.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Feeling better?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good
Got
stuff.
the credit card fraud all taken care of.
Did they catch them?
I don't know. I talked to the airline for a little bit, and they said they were going to try to. So. But you just don't get a follow-up on that.
Yeah.
You don't get an email like, yeah, we busted all 5 of them as they were getting off the plane in Chicago. So
You'll have to check Chicago news.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So
you can find out.
What was so weird is that another friend of mine had something happen to them the same day. So something that we both purchased got hacked or something.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
It is.
Same thing. Not the same destination, but Alaska Airlines. Some airline tickets.
A local friend or someone?
A local friend.
Yeah. They pulled from somewhere.
I don't know. Everybody check your credit card statements.
You got to check gas station, make sure they don't have those little secret things there.
Yeah.
That's how they get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know. But yeah, didn't wake up with any surprise charges on credit card this morning. So,
yeah. Already off to a good week.
Yes. Setting the bar real low.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I came across this video last week. I sent it to you, but I thought we could talk about it just a little bit because we've talked about William Lane Craig on here before. He's pretty prominent as a philosopher and I almost said theologian. And apologist.
Right.
Debates, atheist.
Yeah.
But has some real bad takes.
He does.
When it comes to theology. Because he is first and foremost a philosopher.
Right.
And he lets philosophy dictate how he interprets Scripture instead of Scripture dictating his philosophy.
That's right. Yeah.
And so he has some bad views and came across a bad view last week.
Yeah.
And saw it kind of taking off. Saw some other people talking about it, but thought that we could talk about it a little bit in case anyone from our church ran across it. And William Lane Craig has some good stuff. I'll acknowledge that. I think that he's kind of a heavyweight in like debating atheists.
Yeah.
I think some atheists are reluctant to debate him.
Yeah, they are.
However, that doesn't mean that everything he says is acceptable.
Right.
And this is a major error that he's going to be.
Because he's first and foremost a philosopher,
Yeah.
like you said. He's not a Bible scholar.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so let's watch this video. And let's see if it works. All right, here we go.
If you believe with Roman Catholics and Reformed and Lutheran theologians that Adam's sin and guilt is imputed to every individual human being descended from Adam, then infants and the mentally disabled are going to also need salvation to be applied to them in some way because they carry the guilt of Adam's sin. On the other hand, if, like me, you're not persuaded that this doctrine is biblical, then infants and the mentally retarded are not born sinful, and therefore have no sin that needs to be pardoned or forgiven. And I think this is in accord with Jesus' attitude toward children. When you look at how Jesus regarded children, he said, "Unless you become like a little child, you will not see the kingdom of God. But these children who have faith in me, such is the kingdom of God." So he, I think, clearly believed that these little children were saved, were the recipients of God's salvation. And that would make much better sense than, I think, saying that they were all born vile and corrupted sinners.
All right. Did you catch how he speaks out of both sides of his mouth towards the end?
Mm-hmm.
Like, these children don't have any sin, but they were saved.
Right.
Saved from what? What are you talking? What are you even talking about here? But this plays right into what you've been talking about in Romans.
Mm-hmm. But there's also a problem in how he talks about Jesus and the children.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He's not even. I don't think he even heard what he said, because he said the children had faith.
Yeah. Right.
And
who believe in me.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore are saved.
Yeah.
Right? So you need to become like a child and have faith.
Yeah.
But what do you save for? What do you need faith if you don't need saving?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, yeah, that's a big problem.
Yeah. But the idea that, I mean, we're talking about imputation. If you take his view to its logical conclusion, you've got Pelagianism.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everyone comes into the world as a blank slate. They're essentially a new Adam. And until they actually personally sin, then they're perfect, sinless.
Yeah.
That's a big problem.
I watched this because it started with him, but then everyone was debating it on Twitter, going back and forth.
Yeah.
And it really just became obvious that like what was really being imposed on the Bible was philosophy and logic and things like that. Because you've got Romans chapter 5 is about this whole thing, in which we went through at great length. And verse 16 can't be more clear. Therefore, as one trespass led to condemnation for all men.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you got people saying people aren't born condemned. But
Right.
the Bible says
Yes.
all people are condemned
Right.
because of Adam.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to just say, like, what am I going to believe? Am I going to believe what I think my notions of fairness are and how whatever, or what does the Bible just say?
Mm-hmm.
That's all it comes down to.
Yeah. It's also like he's never been around a child.
Yeah.
It's innocent children that have
Yeah.
never done anything wrong. Like, where does it come from?
Yeah.
We've talked about this before. You don't have to sit down with your child and tell them about stealing.
Yeah.
Like, they know.
Yeah.
Lying.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know how young my kids were when they started lying.
Yeah.
It's
How
really
about
young.
violence? You have
Violence.
children ever lash out in violence?
Anger.
Yeah.
Anger.
Drake lost his first tooth.
Mm.
You know how? Because Brooke punched it out of his face. That's how he lost it.
Yeah.
He was teasing her a little bit, and whop,
Mm.
first tooth come out.
Wow.
Bam.
Yeah.
We didn't let her watch.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't let her watch He-Man or anything evil,
Oh.
George. As we're going to get to later.
Yeah.
Like she had seen violence,
Uh-huh.
never been around violence.
Yeah.
But it was there,
It's inside of us.
laying in there dormant,
Right.
ready to come out.
But another problem is that people like William Lane Craig, and he's not alone. There's a lot of people that don't think that children or mentally disabled people have guilt. They don't want Adam's sin imputed to people, but they don't have a problem with Christ's righteousness being imputed to people.
Right.
And you can't have it both ways and make sense of Romans 5.
Mm-hmm.
It's either both or neither.
Right.
And if you don't have Christ's imputed righteousness, then there's another whole host of problems.
Right.
Now you've almost got like Roman Catholic infused righteousness,
Mm-hmm.
where you have your own righteousness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're right.
And
Yeah.
that's another very big problem.
Yeah, I mean, Christians have been talking about this for
This
nearly
has
2,000 years. Right?
his view, and this doesn't bother him. His view has been condemned as heresy all the way back in like the 4th century.
Right.
But he also calls himself neo. Nestorian? Is
I
that the
have
is that
no
the
idea.
heresy that he? That's the one with Jesus driving
Right.
the man car, right?
Uh-huh.
Like he's got a divine mind, but a human body.
Uh-huh.
I think that's
But
what
that's
he.
Apollinarianism.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What is
I
this?
think.
What's Nestorian?
Nestorian denies.
They all like kind of say the same thing, just with a different part of Jesus being divine.
Right.
Is Nestorian a divine soul?
Let me look it up.
I can't remember. There's like 3 of them that all popped up kind of around the same time, and they were saying kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
That the divine and human nature. There was some I don't know, mixing.
They hold distinction that they're 2 different persons, a divine person, a human person, I
Okay.
believe,
Okay.
is how it plays out.
Okay.
So I know a lot of Roman Catholics will accuse, I believe, Protestants who don't like to refer to Mary as a God
Mm.
bearer as Nestorians.
That's been a hot topic
Yeah.
the last couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I think William Lane Craig calls himself a neo. I think it's Nestorian.
Really
I think so. Yeah.
weird.
And he just openly
He just embraces
openly
it?
says it. Yeah,
Very strange.
it is.
Yeah.
So he's not. I don't think he's going to be too concerned that his view of imputation.
What's really
has
funny
been-
is to see people like pit William Lane Craig against Piper on interpreting Romans. I always get the biggest laugh out of that, man. The biggest laugh.
Mhm.
Piper's like Romans
Right.
was his dissertation, and he preached like 200 sermons on Romans. Like it's insane.
Yeah.
Like I'm going through, compared to him, I'm going through like at a blazing pace. I think on this section where we're at in 7, I'm doing 3 sermons. He's probably got like 10.
Mm, okay.
Yeah, because he's just going through. He's like breaking it down. I
Mhm.
don't have those skills. My skills are in a different, I think, light than Piper's, obviously. But he's interacting with the text at a deep level.
Mm,
But that's his thing.
right.
So you don't pit William Lane Craig, who's a philosopher, like against Piper.
Hmm.
Very weird.
Yeah. Very weird.
And to see like all these people take Craig's side, I'm like, like maybe not.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird, like these guys that were experts in Greek, like Luther and Calvin, and
Mm,
Augustine and Piper, that they are like, nah, they got it all wrong. They got Romans 5 all wrong. They don't know what it says.
yeah. Did you see this New York Times article that came out last week?
I don't know which one.
You can throw it up on the screen, Wayne, if you want to. A hot accessory at the intersection of faith and culture. Seen on influencers, pop stars, and White House staff, cross necklaces are popping up everywhere.
Well, interesting. Just a regular cross?
Yeah. That's just a cross necklace.
Yeah.
It's just a cross necklace.
Weird. Man, there's so many things they could write about. That doesn't seem like a hot story.
Well, if you can get behind the paywall, you can read the entire article. I was able to get most of it, I think, and they are essentially showing that the cross necklace is now like a political statement in like the Trump administration. I don't know. I don't know where the New York Times has been. I mean, people have been wearing cross necklaces as long as I've been alive.
Yeah, I mean, it's like many celebrities who aren't even Christians. You'll see them wearing cross necklaces. You know,
Yeah.
it's like just a thing people do now.
Yeah, I just thought
Weird.
that was funny. Like,
Yeah.
The New York Times, like, what is this new trend?
Yeah, it is an interesting thing though to think about how popular it is, even among like non-believers. They just wear crosses or tattoo crosses on their bodies. Very strange.
Right.
Yeah. Who knows?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, you want to talk about Romans?
Let's do it.
Okay. Well, I have to applaud you for not using any Star Wars openings
Yeah.
yesterday
Yeah.
for
I didn't.
Star Wars Day, because there were. I probably should have brought in a video from. I'm sure if I would have looked on YouTube,
There's
there
all
would have
kinds
been
of
all
already.
kinds of nonsense.
I saw one this morning. The pastor was dressed as a Jedi in full Jedi garb. Missed a good opportunity, I guess.
Yeah.
Didn't I?
I watched a video this morning. I think it was a guy. He was talking about the Jedi, and that was his the Jedi. It was Jesus and the Jedi, and Jedi was all in capital letters.
Huh.
And he said Jedi stood for justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I saw they hand out like lightsabers to the congregants, and they like, dim the
yeah.
lights, and everybody turns them on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So good job not doing any of that.
Yeah, we're not at peak cringe yet, but we're getting close. We gotta be getting close to peak cringe.
I don't know. Every time I think that we've seen the worst of the worst, something else pops up.
Yeah, did you see Michael Todd dressed in the weird lady outfit? What's he doing?
I don't know. He was wearing like a woman's suit.
He was. It was.
That's weird.
Yeah. Looked like he borrowed Hillary Clinton's wardrobe.
We gotta find. If we're gonna talk about it, we gotta find a picture. Let me see if I can find his
You ought to be able to find it pretty
lady
quick.
pantsuit. Yeah, here we go. It's not even the full picture. I gotta see if I can find. Oh, there it is. Yeah, there.
It wouldn't work.
Pastor's out here dressing like aunties now.
What in the world?
Oh,
He's got like
let me see if I can.
he's got a jumper on, a lady's jumper.
Yeah, what is,
What a
what
jacket.
is this?
He's got on some ladies' jewelry too,
Yeah, wow.
and sandals.
That's real bad. Yeah, that's well, I guess once you like spit on your hand and wipe it on somebody's face from the stage, it's all just downhill from there. I mean, where do you go?
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, let's how do we even transition back to Romans?
Yeah.
We're in Romans chapter 7 this morning.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to follow along, we're looking at verses 1 through 6.
Indeed.
I liked your opening
Mhm.
because you didn't assume that anyone knew
I didn't assume this time, George. James Bell.
who James Bell
Who is
was.
he?
Who is he anyway?
It's just a pastor.
Just a pastor.
Yeah, I have a connection somehow.
I
Apparently.
asked a few people who have kind of an English lit background if they knew
Yeah.
who Morgan was, and
Nobody.
no,
Man.
sorry, buddy.
Just
I don't
here to
know.
help you
I don't
guys.
know where you.
Just here to help you guys learn.
Where did you come across William Somerset Maugham?
I don't know. I have these things so like I could be taking a shower and thinking about the sermon, and then just the most random.
You just
thing will pop
William
into my
Somerset
head.
Maugham. I don't even know who this.
Like, imagine if
I
you
don't know
had
who
full
this guy
capacity.
is.
Imagine if you had full capacity to your brain at all times, and you could just pull in everything that you ever interacted with.
Yeah.
It'd be amazing. But that's not how it happens. It happens at the most random time. And if you don't like write it down immediately, then you'll forget it.
I mean, I understand that. I just don't understand where you got this French playwright.
I'm guessing sometime in college when I was asleep in class that I was in and out of consciousness and they were discussing it. That's my theory. Because there's a lot of stuff that I probably just absorbed by being in that like kind of like hypnotic
Yeah.
dream state that I absorbed and I have no knowledge of where it came from. That's my best guess.
I took a whole course on plays
Mhm.
in college, and
Yeah. You're still trying to
do
figure
not-
this out?
Yeah.
It can't be figured out, George. I had a
Alright.
good one last week too, and I can't even remember. Like this week for this sermon, I was like, man, that is good.
Yeah.
And then I didn't write it down, and I
Right.
tried all week to get it back,
Yeah.
and it was gone
Mhm.
into the void.
Yeah, I hate when that happens.
Yeah,
Oh well, this one was good.
wasn't meant to be.
Yeah.
Wasn't meant to be.
James Bell, was it an article?
So he came across in my Facebook. I have a connection
Mhm.
I'm friends
Okay.
with somebody that he's friends with. And,
Yeah.
And he had posted this and wrote like some of his comments on it, and I was like, man, this dude he's not pulling punches.
Yeah. This is we've talked about this before. I mean, summer's kicking off. Falls Creek is going to start. We're going to have all these decisions that we're told about from all these teenagers that go
Right.
to Falls Creek over the summer. They walk an aisle, they say a prayer, they fill out a card, they're making a decision to follow Christ, rededicate their life. They come back and they're just gone.
In this case, though, maybe even worse because these were baptized.
Yeah.
Baptized, yeah.
Mhm.
So, yeah, he writes about how the SBC had done a study. They had baptized 7.1 million people over 20 years. That's a lot of people.
That is.
That's a lot of people,
Yeah.
man. But that's what they're aiming at right there, aiming at that.
Is that in America or is that just worldwide? What is
I'm
that?
not really sure.
Okay.
I would guess probably worldwide if they're looking at it, but majority of that's America.
Yeah.
But then they had no track. They couldn't track where any of these people were they gone. They lost them. And so during the same time period, the SBC numbers actually declined significantly while they had baptized. And so, but if they had just retained the 7.1, the numbers of the SBC would have doubled.
Yeah.
They didn't double. They actually went down.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, the solutions that they come up with.
If you've ever been to a Southern Baptist like convention,
Yeah.
you'll see this weird paradox where the missions agencies will talk about all these people that have been baptized, and then you'll have people get up and say, they'll lament that numbers are down.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
It's like, how can both of these be true at the same time?
Yeah. And so what Bell's pointing out is that obviously these are not real conversions. And the most definitive thing that I think he said, which was, I think, ties into Romans 6 and then leads us into 7, is he said, real converts don't have to be begged, bribed, or entertained in order to attempt to create interest in following Jesus. Because the SBC's answer was like, we need programs on discipleship.
Right.
For how to get these people to be church goers and stick.
Right.
And his whole thing is, you don't have to do that.
Uh-huh.
If somebody's actually converted, you don't have to bribe them. You don't have to entertain them. You don't have
Right.
to plead with them to follow Jesus. They just do.
Yeah. What I was thinking about as you were going through that is we have a pretty serious members like process to become a member. And we've actually done church discipline on people who have not attended church for years.
Right.
Like we've actually removed people from the roll because of non-attendance. And that is not something that Southern Baptist churches do.
Right.
Right. If you go to probably a typical Southern Baptist church, there will be hundreds, maybe thousands of people on their membership roll.
Yeah.
And then there's maybe 200 in attendance on a given Sunday.
So let's say you go to a normal Baptist church, Southern Baptist church would be 100 in attendance or less. That makes up the vast majority of SBC.
Right.
Despite like the big churches getting all the clout. That's what the SBC is composed of. It's probably like 90% of the church is 100 or less. But if that church has been in existence for like 50 years, what it looks like is if you go in, they may have like 90 people in attendance. Their membership rolls could be like 800. That's pretty common.
Right. Yeah. I was talking to someone just a few weeks ago who was shocked that our weekly attendance is higher than our membership roll. Like, you have more people who attend on Sunday morning than our members,
Yeah.
because that is bizarre
Right.
in a lot of churches. And I told this person, yeah, and you know, we expect our members to come to church. Like, that is setting the bar like as low as possible for membership. Like, what do you expect from your members? Well, to come.
Right.
to attend.
Right.
To attend.
Yeah,
And that I mean, for anyone who's not a member, that doesn't mean that we're going after people for missing a Sunday.
Right.
When we talk about disciplining people for non-attendance, we're usually talking about years.
A long pattern.
Yeah, a long pattern of not attending, which is just what you're saying. We don't have to. You shouldn't have to twist people's arms. If they're actually believers, you shouldn't have to twist their arms to get them to come to church on a Sunday morning.
Right. Yeah.
They should want to come.
Yeah.
And if they don't come for years, well, they've already removed themselves from the church. We're just saying, okay.
Yeah.
Right, we're just affirming what they've already done.
Yeah. With a warning.
I mean, if we keep them on the roll, what? I mean, what? Yeah, we'll keep you as a member.
Yeah.
But you obviously don't care about being a member. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to twist. Yeah, you shouldn't have to twist a believer's arm to go to church on Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
to read their Bible, to pray, to live a godly life.
Yeah.
So, but that's too much for a lot of churches.
Yeah. It's weird. I mean, but it comes down to I think where they mess up is their view of conversion and what that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're going to be talking about the law today.
Mm-hmm.
And for the rest of the chapter, we'll be talking about the law.
Next couple weeks, yeah.
How do we get here? Before we have you read the passage, where are we? How do we get to this discussion from where we've been in Romans? And what does it have to do with what we're talking about with conversion?
Yeah. So chapter 6 sets this up by raising the question. People, they hear the gospel, and then when the gospel is preached correctly, which is you are not saved by works or ceremony like circumcision or anything that you do. You are saved by faith alone, through grace alone, in Christ alone. And that people will object. The fallen man will object on a couple fronts. One being, if that's true, then grace gives us a license to sin, which what I would argue is fed into the culture by people saying these are legitimate conversions, which was the link, right? We got all these legitimate conversions, but where are they? They've never been to church. We don't know where they are. They're not, like, you don't have to beg people to follow Christ. And that's why I use that intro, because that's what started this whole thing. Like, if you are a Christian, do you use grace as a license to sin? And he says, absolutely not. It's impossible. In fact, it's impossibility because of your union with Christ, because the Spirit of God indwells you and has joined you to Christ in all of his work, and everything that he is and has is yours in Christ. You can't continue to live in sin. It's an impossibility. It cannot happen because God's Spirit lives in you. And through that union, a Christian does not abuse grace. He doesn't use it as a license to sin. The other one is that arises at the 6:14, where he says, sin will have no dominion over you, since you are not under the law but under grace. And then people say in verse 15, what then? Are we to sin because we're not under the law but under grace? So what this is I'm free from the law's penalty, right? Now, I'm covered in grace. Does that mean I can just live however I want and just sin and it doesn't matter? So the law has no application to me whatsoever. And he answers that by that illustration of slavery, where he says, you were slaves of sin, now you're slaves of righteousness. You had this old master producing in you sin, and which leads to death, but now you have a new master who reigns in grace, and he produces in you righteousness and life. So present your bodies, your physical bodies, to his service. Present yourselves to your new master as a servant, and which will produce righteousness, fruit, good works, walking in newness of life, leading to your sanctification. That's what we talked about last week. So this week, it seems as 7 starts, he knows that there's still questions about what does it mean to not be under the law. So that was provoked by that verse 14. Sin will have no dominion over you, since you were not under the law but under grace. So this answers the questions. 7 is really dealing with our relation to the law. So we can see that. So 7, there's kind of I think a good breakdown. 7, 1 through 6 is about our relationship to the law now. We're dead to the law. It's pretty much is what he's saying. Then as we look at 7 through 12, we see him kind of answering another question that people might get the impression, based off what we talk about today, that the law is bad, that there's something wrong with it, that it's not good. In fact, should we say that law is sin? That's what in verse 7 that he sees this potential objector. What shall we say, that the law is sin? By no means. So he's going to answer that question by speaking to what the law is and what it does. And then in 13 through the end of the chapter, we see really the weakness of the law. And the weakness of the law isn't even in the law itself. It's in us. That's how it breaks down. So it's all about the law. How do we understand not being under the law, and in what sense are we not under the law? And in maybe what is the law's uses now for us that are Christians? Yeah. And so that's what he's grappling with here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's have you read the passage.
All right. Let's pull it up. There we go. Or do you not know, brothers, for I am speaking to those who know the law, that the law is binding on a person only as long as he lives? For a married woman is bound by law to her husband while he lives, but if her husband dies, she is released from the law of marriage. Accordingly, she will be called an adulteress if she lives with another man while her husband is alive. But if her husband dies, she is free from the law, and if she marries another man, she is not an adulteress. Likewise, my brothers, you also have died to the law through the body of Christ, so that you may belong to another, to him who has been raised from the dead, in order that we may bear fruit for God. For while we were living in the flesh, our sinful passions aroused by the law were at work in our members to bear fruit for death. But now that we are released from the law, having died to that which held us captive, so that we serve in the new way of the Spirit and not in the old way of the written code.
All right. Well, we're going to look at 3 theological truths concerning the law.
Yep.
And I like I like how you were framing, why does this matter?
Yeah.
Because we look at this and we ask the question, who cares? What does this have to do with anything? And you went to Matthew 23, where Jesus is just blasting the religious leaders of his day. It's the woes.
Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees. He just hits them over and over.
Right. And these are men who they prided themselves in keeping the law.
Yeah, they're
we see it with Paul. I mean, he talks about how under the law blameless.
Right. Yeah.
Not meaning that he was sinless, but that he adhered to the law.
Yeah, this group emerges post-exile, right? So their reasoning is very understandable, I would think, to a degree. Yeah. They're like, we got exiled and led into captivity because we didn't keep the law. Now we're back. Well, then we're going law.
Right.
Hardcore. Yeah. In fact, we'll make other laws around the law to keep people from even getting close to breaking the law. And so they're living by the law. Right. The error they've fallen into, though, is using the law incorrectly. And that's what Paul hammers on in Romans all the time. And they're using the law because they think it can actually make them righteous before God, acceptable. Right. So, like, if we were exiled from the land, well, then we could use the law to actually make ourselves right with God and acceptable to God by keeping it.
Right.
And that's who the woes are directed to. Right.
Yeah. But they have this external righteousness.
Yeah.
But he calls them filled with dead men's bones.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he calls them whitewashed tombs.
Yeah.
They look beautiful. They have a
Right.
good appearance of law keeping and being righteous, but they're not righteous.
And I think even in my own upbringing, this focus on externals was emphasized.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want to downplay externals. I mean, we'll get to talking about how we should have externals. I mean, the chapter 6 is all about not living antinomian lives. We are supposed to bear fruit. But you didn't want people to go away from the sermon yesterday with this idea that I'm obeying all these external rules, but there's nothing inward.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so your purpose was for people to not trust in just external rule keeping.
Yeah.
But for something inward to actually occur.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And I think that's a good reminder. And so we'll unpack that a little bit as we go through.
Yeah.
All right. So 3 theological truths concerning the law. The first is that we need to understand the binding nature of the law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he starts by talking about marriage.
Yeah. Seems strange, right? But
Yeah.
you can see a clear logical connection to how this is presented. He's going to end up at a conclusion that we don't serve God by the letter of the law or the old written code. There's a new way to live now, and that's life in the Spirit, which actually does what people are trying to do by keeping laws. They're trying to live a life that is acceptable and pleasing to God. But his thing is like, you don't do that. Actually, by keeping the law, it's a new way by the Spirit. And to get them there, he wants them to understand how the law is binding on a person. And so he introduces this principle that the law is binding on a person as long as he lives. That's where he gives the marriage illustration. Then he'll say, likewise, and he'll connect a immediate application to what he just said on the believer, and then what is now the implication on how you live your life in light of that truth. So it's like a clear connection, at least it seems to me anyway, and people like to argue about everything under the sun, it seems in commentaries, but it seems to be that's how it's presented. Let me give you an illustration to help you grasp what I'm saying. Now I'm going to apply that directly to you, and then now here's what it means for living. That's the way it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So walk us through this illustration of marriage.
All right.
So that we can understand, because he's using the illustration of marriage, but he's not really talking about marriage.
Right.
And so walk us through the illustration a little bit so we can unpack it.
All right. So he says, do you not know, brothers? And so one thing we should know is there could be at this point, I don't think this is completely rhetorical, that they all would know, because part of the church is Gentile, part of it are they're Jews. For do you not know, I'm speaking to those who know the law. So I'm going to talk to you about something that the Jewish people would know in this congregation concerning marriage, right? And he goes into this illustration of marriage based on God's law, because Roman law has their laws of marriage, which are not aligned with God's law. Mm-hmm. So in this time, when this book was written, a man or woman may divorce their spouse, a Roman citizen, for any reason, at any time, for whatever reason they want. So in that regard, the marriage laws of Rome are very much like our laws, I would say, in America, which the same thing can happen. Man or woman may initiate divorce pretty much for any reason.
Right.
We call them no-fault divorces.
Yeah.
But that's not the law he's appealing to. He's appealing to God's law. And we'll talk more about God's law this next week. But God's law is captured in the Ten Commandments most succinctly. The rest of the laws are connected. Those are like linchpins for every category of the rest of the Mosaic law that emerges, because there are many laws, but they're all linked. Those are like the anchor points for these laws. And the law he speaks to is the law of marriage. What is God's law of marriage? And God's law of marriage, he says, is binding until someone dies. Mm-hmm. So if you marry your wife, you're married to your wife until she dies. Or in this case, the way he says it, a woman is married to her husband, and she's bound by law to her husband until the husband dies. Mm-hmm. But when the husband dies, she's now released from the law. The law does not apply to her anymore. So if a woman leaves her husband, and goes to another man, the law declares that she's an adulteress.
Mm-hmm.
That law doesn't apply if her husband dies. If her husband dies, she's free. Now she's free to find a new husband and marry him, and she's not an adulteress. She's free to be bound to another man.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way the illustration is set up.
Yeah.
It's easy to understand. The principle is the law is binding on you until you die.
Yeah.
If you're a living human, you're bound by God's law until you die.
Right. You made a little error
Oh yeah.
in your sermon that
I said
I think everyone
Andrew Jackson.
I think everyone caught.
Was it Andrew Jackson?
It was
Being married in 1991?
1971.
1971.
And
yeah.
I could hear like the rustling around me.
Yeah. Well, they froze him in the Alcor Labs with Ted Williams. Came out.
Got married.
He was going to run for office again, but the
Okay.
scandal of divorce kept him.
So
him
what?
out.
So what happened? He married. So did he marry his wife before her previous marriage was?
Yeah. So 1791, he marries Rachel Donaldson Roberts,
Okay.
and I guess he thinks everything's good, but
Okay.
she was married before,
Mm-hmm.
and they weren't divorced.
Mm.
So he married a married woman.
Okay.
And so it wasn't for another 4 years before their divorce was finalized.
Wow.
So during that whole period, like she's living in
Right.
this bigamous adultery.
Yeah, right.
It's a bigamous adultery
Right.
according to U.S. standards.
Yeah.
And it became a political scandal.
Wow.
That was weaponized against him.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Huh.
Can you imagine today? I mean, just imagine today, like J.D. Vance.
Right.
Pretend J.D. Vance is running in the
Right.
next cycle, and people find out your wife's married to another person.
Yeah.
Like it'd be a career ender.
Would it? I don't know.
You don't think it would be?
Well, maybe for a Republican.
Yeah, if he
Maybe
ran
not.
as a Democrat,
Maybe
it'd be
not for a Democrat.
It'd be no problem.
Well, that's what's so ironic because people have criticized Trump because how many times has Trump been married? Three
Yeah,
times?
a lot of times,
4
yeah.
times? But if we were to examine all of the marriages in politics,
Yeah,
there probably would be very few that are going to come out clean. Right. But yeah, I think that, and you brought it up, that this isn't about marriage, but we kind of have to talk about marriage a little bit because of the illustration,
Yeah,
and for us to really grasp it, because, and I think Paul does the same thing because he's talking to Jewish people who understand what he's talking about with the law, when the Romans would be like, well, it's kind of a free for all.
right.
And that's the culture that we're living in, is where marriage is kind of a free for all. We don't think about marriage as seriously as we ought to,
Right.
and that's true in the church.
Mm-hmm.
We don't think about it as seriously as we ought to. I think that I think Christians know that there's something binding about it, but they still in just regular practice, they don't, it's not worked out the way that it should.
Right.
The idea that it's a covenant between two people in the sight of God.
Yeah.
And so God is involved in this covenant
Mhm.
ceremony.
Yeah. Yeah. You're asking God to bear witness to this
Mhm.
and hold accountable the two
Right.
parties.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that's the way it should be viewed. And according to God, once this ceremony is done,
Mhm.
which is a religious ceremony, that's the other flaw we have today. I think Christian people think this is just a legal contract.
Right.
It's not. They may be a legal contract for the state to acknowledge certain rights for you, but it's primarily a religious ceremony.
Right.
It's a covenant.
There's something mystical about it.
Yeah.
When Moses writes that the two become one, I don't think he's just talking about the sexual relationship. I don't think Jesus is either in Matthew when he talks about what God has joined together, let no man tear asunder.
Yeah.
I don't think he's just talking about the sexual relationship. I think there is actually like a melding together of these two people.
Yeah. It's like, it's similar to the mystical union we have with Christ,
Right.
which is
There's a reason why
yeah.
that's one of the primary
Mm-hmm.
illustrations.
Maybe it's difficult for people to get it if they get married older because they have become their own person. Like it's so solidified. Like if you get married and you're 35, you've never been married before, and your wife hasn't either. You're both in your mid 30s. Well, you graduated high school, and you've got a good 15 years of you becoming a very independent, singular entity of a person. But if you get married young, then you literally grow together, which is the word he uses for united, as we're united with Christ. Well, that same thing happens with your spouse. If you get married at a young age, you grow together, and you've been married for 20 years. Like you finish each other's sentences. You may say actually the same thing in response to someone at the same time.
Yeah.
Like you even start to think the same way.
Right.
But what I wanted to get people to get is say, look, this is God's standard for marriage. We're not even going to talk about the two exemptions, really. I just told them, like, yeah, we get because of our sin how God graciously gives two exceptions to this for adultery and spousal abandonment. But that's not the law. His ideal, God's standard, his ideals, when you get married, that binds you for life.
Yeah, you can't argue some kind of exemption from the law.
Right.
Either as a Jew under the Mosaic covenant, or as a Gentile who's under God's moral law. Yeah, you there's no third kind of person.
Right.
Like you're under the law as a Jew, as a Gentile, and it's you're bound to it.
Yeah. So we should, and I didn't want to make it a topical sermon, but since it's a podcast, maybe we elaborate more. Like, so even if you have been divorced, you can't unring the bell.
Right.
The spouse you have now, this is how you are to view your spouse. This marriage I am in is for life.
Right.
I'm bound to this person now forever.
Yeah.
And I'm not ever going to abandon this person, no matter what happens to them. If they become mentally ill, right? I plan to have a serious conversation with both Brooke and Lydia. Right, my kids are getting married. Drake's marrying Lydia. Brooke's, marrying Alex. But their husbands are going in the military, and I plan to sit them down and say, when you take this vow, you're marrying this person for life. If they go to war and they come back and they're not the person that you married to you, because they're so different now,
right,
which is likely to happen, they're not going to be the same person. You are married to that person. And you cannot abandon them. You cannot leave them. So whatever issues they've got, they're your issues now, and you got to work through it with them.
Yeah.
Right. And if you can't do it, then you need to cancel it right now.
Yeah, I mean that's an excuse that people give, not just for military, but this isn't the same person I married, 15 years ago.
Right.
As if that's an excuse to abandon your marriage vows.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so because of the law, the entire world is bound to it. And as we've already seen walking through Romans, that's not good news.
No. No. And that's this application he's making. The law has these demands. The law has power and dominion and has this authority over humanity. But it doesn't bring us to salvation and righteousness. It brings us to the point of condemnation where every mouth will be stopped. And you'll be under that power and authority until death.
Right.
Which is the final penalty for the law, for lawbreakers.
Right.
Is death.
Yeah.
Which is not good news.
Yeah. But it does bring us to the next point.
Yeah.
Right. The next theological truth concerning the law is that not only do we understand that the law is binding on us until we die, that's the bad news.
Yeah.
The good news is the second truth, that we understand that if you're a Christian, you've died to the law.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings us back to the beginning of chapter 6. That kind of brings it all together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because just as a wife is bound to her husband until he dies, and then she's free to marry someone else. So we're bound to the law until there's been a death.
Yeah. And that's what he says when he says likewise. It's signaling a logical inference based on what he just said. Now he's applying it to you as a Christian. So just as a woman was bound, you were bound to the law, but you died to the law. And so dying to the law, we have to ask kind of the question, in what sense have I died to the law? Well, we know it can't mean that the law has absolutely no benefit for our life whatsoever, or that I'm now free to invent my own laws and live
Right.
my life my own way. As he'll go on in chapter 7 to talk about as we see the different uses that the law has for our life. So it means that we have died to its contextually from chapter 6 to its power and authority over our life and its demands and its condemnation,
Yeah.
right, and its penalties. So we died to the law in that sense.
Yeah.
And he's talked about the law in various points all through this letter, going all the way back to chapter 3. And the impression that we get is that the law does not produce righteousness, because that's what he's trying to get us to see. It does reveal sin. It does show that we're under the wrath of God, but it does not provide a way of escape.
The children's catechism that we use has questions about the law, and my wife brought it to my attention that question 64 asks, of what use are the 10 commandments to us? And the answer is they teach us our duty and show us our guilt and our need of a savior.
Yeah, that's literally where we're going next week.
Yeah.
It's going to show that.
Right.
Which are good things, right? But we don't use those. We don't use the law to try to make ourselves righteous. Indeed, we can't. So it only brings us to the point of condemnation because it has a strict demand, and the demand of the law is perfect obedience. We always forget that. Like people who fall into legalism, I think they forget that the law demands perfection, which no one can do.
Right.
James talks about that, and Galatians 3:10 also talks about that. And if you don't abide by everything in the law, you're under a curse. So you're cursed. So what do we die to? We die from the demands of perfection. We die to the demands which bring us a curse, that we're cursed under the law.
Right.
And so when did this happen? He tells us very clearly. It happened in the body of Christ. You have died to the law through the body of Christ. The ESV
which brings us back to union.
Brings
union
us back
with
to
Christ.
union. Yeah,
Right.
we're talking about union again.
Yeah.
I like the ESV, and I still plan to use it to finish Romans, but it's pretty weak in this translation.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what I mean?
I keep coming back to that. I keep coming back to,
Yeah.
we keep using the ESV, but we keep having to like make excuses for the
I'll probably
for
finish.
the ESV.
I'll probably finish Romans, and then when I go to a new book, I may switch over. We'll see.
Yeah.
The LSB.
LSB says, "So my brothers, you also were made to die to the law," which is the point that you were getting at. It's passive, right?
Yeah. Holman Christian Standard Bible is even better,
Yeah.
I think. Therefore, my brothers, you were also put to death in relation to the law through the crucified body of the Messiah. That's really clear.
Yeah.
So when did we die to the law? At Christ's crucifixion. Again, we're linked back to 6, where we learned that we died to sin in Christ when he died. And now he says, just like that, you died to the law when he died. And so the illustration kind of flips at this point, right? Because before it was a woman whose husband died, and now the woman is free. But here it's you died. You're the person that died in the illustration, and now you're free because you died in Christ to the law.
Right.
And so that's the point that he's making.
And so you're free to marry.
You're free to be
a new husband.
And that's why we died.
Yeah.
We died to the law, not just to be free from its penalties, but so we could be joined to another.
Right.
And we're joined to Christ.
Yeah.
And that's the point he's driving at. And so we talked a little bit about the imagery that's used as Christ as our bridegroom, and we, the church, as his bride. That imagery is all through the New Testament. It's very clear in Ephesians. It's very clear in Revelation. But people they still debate. I saw it this past week that the church isn't the bride of Christ. Have you seen people try to debate that stuff?
What are they?
They're trying to say it's Israel.
It's Israel.
And it's not Gentiles.
I don't, looking at Romans 11 and Ephesians 3 and Galatians, I don't know how you don't see that there's not two people.
Right.
It's one. I mean, Paul's whole illustration in Ephesians 3 is that the two have now become one. There's a
Right.
new man
Yeah.
consisting of believing Jews and believing Gentiles.
Right.
That's Romans 11.
Right.
There were two trees. There's one. There's one believing tree, and the Gentiles have been grafted into believing Israel,
Right.
and unbelieving
Right.
Jews have been cut off.
Right.
So there's one tree.
One tree.
I just don't know how you. I don't know how you interpret those passages.
I don't either, and especially here, like this is addressed to a church of Jews and Gentiles, and he's saying if you're a Christian, you are joined, like in a marriage, to
Right.
Christ.
Yeah.
That he's
He's not a polygamist.
right,
He's got one bride.
right,
He's got one.
Yeah.
I don't. And we can debate over, the role of ethnic Israel in the future, and we have some disagreements on that, but that there's one people of God is the consistent view from the very beginning of the Bible.
right,
I mean, even with Abraham, like all the nations will be blessed. And the prophets are talking about the Gentiles coming in.
Is
It's
it
weird.
Isaiah?
It's weird.
Is it Isaiah 61 where Gentiles serve as priests?
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
somewhere in Isaiah.
Yeah.
You even get it in places like the end of Esther,
Mhm.
when the Gentiles see how Haman's plot has been foiled. It says that many of them declared themselves to be Jews that day.
Wow. Yeah.
It's like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
They convert.
Right.
They convert, and they're now considered Jews.
hmm
I don't know.
Yeah. But here it's clear, like you died to the law, you're free now, and you've been joined to Christ for the purpose, and this is where it always comes back to over these last two chapters, so that you would bear fruit for God.
Right.
So he's answering clearly the objectors that would say, if you're a Christian, you're antinomian. You won't ever follow the law. Well, we won't follow the law on the point of trying to justify ourselves before God.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that what God has done, what he's saying is God has done something you weren't expecting. He's going to make a people that actually do obey the law and not the law by the letter,
Right.
which is what the external conformities are showing. He's going to have a people that actually bear real fruit for God, that are obeying the spirit of the law.
Right.
And so are living righteous lives.
Yeah.
Again, we come back to this, like you don't have to beg, bribe, and entertain a Christian to actually live like a Christian. And in one sense, they don't really have a choice, right? If the Spirit of God indwells you and is empowering you to live a righteous life, like you're going to do it. Now, you're going to do it imperfectly and to varying degrees. Like people who become a Christian who have got long patterns of sin built in their life, sometimes God just strips that away from them and they're immediately free from all of it. And I've seen that in people.
Yeah.
But I have also seen people who struggle with a certain sin for a long period of time.
Right.
And they may go through periods where they aren't really struggling it, but then it pops up. And so it becomes a lifelong struggle. But the Christian is the one who struggles against their sin.
Right.
Because they're going to produce fruit for God. They're joined to Christ, and in Christ, in our union, He causes us to bear fruit,
Right.
For His own glory and for our good. I mean, it's all through this theology of bearing fruit. It's all through the Bible, all through the New Testament. We're given the Spirit of God to bear the fruit of the Spirit. So where once in your old man, when you were joined to the law, the fruit that you produced was in keeping with your natural person. So you are a selfish person, right? People don't like to think of themselves this way, but if they truly examine themselves, right, and don't lie to themselves, they'll see they're filled with pride. They're filled with lust, not just lust in the sexual sense, but a lust and a passion for all kinds of things in this world to fill their desires. And the fact that's we'll get into coveting next week, and that's kind of what coveting is, right? It's a lust for the things of the world,
Right.
Anger, bitterness, lying, murder in the heart. Even if you've never committed murder, hating people and murdering them in your heart, adultery, which doesn't just have to be physical. We learn you may keep the letter of the law and never actually commit the act of it itself, but we know what Jesus teaches is you have if the heart isn't aligned with God, what God is aiming at in that command,
Right.
and you bear fruit for death.
Hmm.
But when you are joined to another through the Spirit, you're going to bear the fruit of the Spirit. Like it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Your life is transformed.
Right.
And so those things that you used to do are like replaced with their counter. It'd be cool to like make a chart of like the vices and the sins that we did in our old man, and then to see, I bet you could lay on them the fruit of the Spirit as like a replacement. Maybe we should have done that. Thrown it up on the screen. Who knows? That could have been cool.
A new picture.
Yeah.
You're going to draw another picture for us, Jay?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're free from its condemning power. We've been joined to another so that we would bear fruit to God. So being free from the law, out from under the law, does not mean lawlessness.
Right.
It actually means the opposite. It means now we can bear fruit for God.
Right. We've already been hitting on it, so we'll transition to the third truth, which is that we need to understand that righteousness does not come from the law. And so the question that you asked is, are we changed from the outside in or from the inside out?
Right.
And you've already given the answer.
Right. Yeah. We've already seen it, but now he makes it more explicit. He says, when we're living in our flesh, our sinful passions aroused by the law, we're at work in our members to bear fruit for death, which is the very thing we talked about. But here he's trying to, it seems rather, to emphasize or set up something he just briefly touches on, which he'll bring back up at 7, that the problem's not really with the law. Our sinful passions were aroused by the law, because he'll say the law is good. He'll actually say it's holy and righteous and good. And so we see what the problem is here, which we'll get into next week as well, that in our old man being under the law is revealing what sin is revealing God's righteous standards, but there's not a problem with it, it's a problem with us. We learn of the things that God forbids, and our sinful passions in us, they are aroused, and they make us want to do the things we're not supposed to do. And that bears fruit. That doesn't bear fruit for life, it bears fruit for death.
Right.
And so it's really clear. Like, I can't be changed and conformed to the image of Christ by trying to get the external conformities to the law right. And what he's saying is that's not going to ever change your heart. The key problem is the heart.
Right. Yeah, we were talking about it with the kids yesterday. Is where were the 10 Commandments written? Because you kept bringing up the 10 Commandments as the summary of the law.
Yeah.
Where were the 10 Commandments written? They were written on stone tablets. Well, what does that do for anybody? I mean, if we're talking about you don't have to twist the arm of a believer to do believing stuff. Look at the Old Testament. I mean, what is God doing through the book of Judges? He's twisting Israel's arm to get them to obey the law.
Right.
Because the law written on stone tablets, it doesn't have power to affect inward change. It can only do something outwardly.
Right. Yeah. And if you think about the depths of human depravity from this regard, the Pharisees thought they were keeping the law when they crucified Christ.
Right.
So that's how twisted we can be with a good thing.
Right.
God's law is good.
Yes.
Evil men can twist it in such a manner as to completely clear their conscience into crucifying their own Messiah.
Right.
That's the depths of depravity. So you could never change someone's heart by these externals. And God didn't even give them for that reason, as we'll get into next week.
Right. So if the problem of the law is our hearts, then something has to happen to our hearts in order for the law to actually be used lawfully.
Yeah. But before we do, I got to know. I shared my personal stories, George, with how my sinful passions were aroused by that what I was not allowed to do as a child. And I got to know, What did George do?
I had a very similar story. Only it was maybe worse. Well, I don't know. Maybe just bad in a different way.
Okay.
In elementary school, I was a crossing guard. So the gym teacher was in charge of like the crossing guards, and he would choose people to do crossing guard, and I was one of the crossing guards back behind the school, neighborhood streets. Me and my friend had this great idea. Let's skip rocks across the across the street when there's downtime, there's no one coming. Let's kill some time by skipping rocks across the street. And one time, and we did. I mean, that it's wrong. Like, you don't. Like, why are we throwing rocks? Not little pebbles, like rocks.
But knowing it was wrong,
Knowing it was wrong,
made
and
it exciting.
It's exciting. Yeah. And one time I did it, and it hit a bad jump and hit him right in the head and busted his head open, and we had to go. We had to run inside, and I had to get stitches, and I was no longer a crossing guard. But it was kind of similar to your story of throwing boards. Out the window.
The tiles.
I was supposed to tell you that when we were talking about it, Phineas said it serves you right that you that you cut your head open.
You sow to the wind, you reap
it was
the whirlwind.
It was so ironic because out of all the kids, who would be the one who would throw boards out a window? It would absolutely be Phineas.
That's funny. Yeah.
So serves you right.
Yeah, and it is an experiment. It can be recreated by any parent.
Oh, yeah.
You just tell a kid, don't touch this thing. They've never thought about it, and they're going to, as soon as you leave, they're going to try.
You don't even have to have kids to know this. You know that there's a thrill to doing something that you're not supposed to do.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, if people will just be honest with themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's why, like, alternative cultures are a thing.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be a thing if they were like widely accepted as the norm. If they're the norm, nobody wants to do them.
Yeah.
That they want to do the thing that's taboo or outside of the bounds of what's acceptable.
Yeah.
Because there's a thrill to it.
Yeah. And I think we've seen that with like the trans movement. I mean, we've talked about it before when we were growing up in high school. Like, these were the weirdos that were getting bullied, and the popular kids at school were the jocks, right? And now it's cool to be the weirdo. Like, everyone's trying to outdo each other in how weird they can be.
Yeah,
and it's that thrill of doing something that is taboo.
Yeah.
I wonder if we'll reach a tipping point where
it's not cool anymore.
It's not cool anymore because everyone is a weirdo.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Maybe it'll be cool.
People keep inventing weirder and weirder stuff, so who knows?
Maybe it'll be cool and rebellious to be married to one person for life.
Ooh.
You got to rebel against the man. Get married young.
I wonder if that's even part of the trad wife trend. Is that thrill of
being countercultural?
Being countercultural, yeah.
I bet to some degree, to some that's part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a good reason to do that.
Not a good reason.
Yeah.
I
don't know. But yeah, the sin is the problem.
Yeah.
Our sinful heart, it craves what it knows it shouldn't have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's what
and you brought it back to Genesis 3 with Eve. I mean, that Satan knew exactly what tactic to use.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she sins already before she actually takes the fruit. The word that she sees and she desires, the word desire is covet. It's the word in the 10th command.
Yeah.
So she's already coveting.
Yeah.
Before she takes it. And that the serpent is amplifying the law.
Mm-hmm.
He's being a Pharisee. Like, he's the first Pharisee, right? Did God really say you can't eat of any of the trees in the garden? And then her response is she's a Pharisee now also.
Yeah.
No, we can't we can have any except this one. We can't eat it or touch it.
Yeah.
Like she's adding to the law. And with that conversation, which is really about the law, it incites in her coveting, and she takes it and eats it, and they fall.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is interesting, though, that this is the one that Paul uses in his example coming up. It's coveting.
Yeah. Well, out of all of the second table of the law, honoring your parents, don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't lie, don't covet. Out of those, how do you regulate coveting?
Right.
Like what law can you what punishment can you? I mean, how can you even gauge if someone is doing that? It's something that's inside.
Yeah, and that's this is why he uses it.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to bring out next week and show. Coveting is the one that is really about your heart.
Right.
No one can see if you're doing it. Only you know it. Only God knows if you're coveting.
Yeah.
You can fake an external conformity as a non-coveter.
Yeah.
To everyone.
Right.
While you're coveting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is interesting, which is, as you just brought out, how the fall takes place, and it shows this principle that's at work, is that
what goes on in the heart is worked out in what we do.
Yeah.
And that's Jesus brings that up in Matthew 15, that it's out of the heart that all of these things spring up.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
And so if you want the outworking to be pure, then the source has to be changed.
Yeah. So we can't change ourselves by having rules, all of these rules and lists. We've got to be changed from the inside out, and that's what he says. We are free now because we've been released and we're joined to another. We're free to serve God in a new way, and it is a new way. This is one of the reasons. There are many reasons I think to adopt a Baptist covenant theology, and this I think adds more fuel to that fire for me. That this is a new way. There was an old way. That's the Mosaic economy.
Right.
We don't have a new administration of the Mosaic economy. We have a new economy.
Right.
We have a new covenant that is actually new. And it's new because it's the Spirit that is producing in us a change which leads to our obedience to God's commands.
Right. It couldn't be any clearer in Jeremiah 31. I don't know how you can interpret it differently than this.
Yeah.
The problem, and Hebrews 8 brings it out. The problem is with them. It's not with the covenant. It's not with the law. It's with them. And so he promises a new covenant where he will put his law within them. He even says it's not like the covenant I made with their fathers on the day when I took them out of Egypt.
Right.
Like he even makes this distinction. It's not Sinai. It's a new covenant.
Right.
And it's not laws written on stone tablets at Sinai. It's the law written on their hearts.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then, coming with that, we see as we look at the other New Covenant passages in the Old Testament, we see that this is a work of the Spirit. The Spirit of God is the one who does this. He takes away our heart of stone, which is bound under the law and only leads in death, replaces it with a new heart, a living heart. This is regeneration. And coming with regeneration is the writing of the law in the heart and the empowering of the Spirit to actually obey God and to bear fruit for God. And this is the good news of the gospel, that the Spirit does for us what the law can't do. It's the whole point, right? The new covenant is the covenant that Christ, he solidifies with his perfect sacrifice on the cross, earning for us all the benefits that are Christ. They're given to us all the way to glorification. But the administration of this covenant happens by the Spirit, and that is a new thing, right? No longer in this covenant are you going to have to tell people to know the Lord,
right?
Because everyone in the covenant knows the Lord because they're indwelled by Him.
Yeah,
and He's empowering them to
and
bear
they
fruit.
have new desires.
Yeah,
their desires are not being regulated by laws written on stone tablets outside of them. But the law being written on their heart means that their affections and desires have now been changed.
Yeah.
And that's what he talks about in Romans 8, that those who are in the flesh, they don't want to.
Yeah.
They don't want to obey the law. They can't.
They cannot. He says they can't.
Yeah.
They
But
cannot.
now, through the new covenant and the law being written on hearts, now we can because we want to.
Mm-hmm. That's right. You got it exactly.
It's the reversal of total depravity or
It is.
inability. Now
Yeah.
we have the ability.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so that's it, right? In a nutshell, we now serve by a new way of the Spirit and not in the old way of the written code. And there's a lot of application that can be made for this. And I thought one for us that's obvious is like how you raise your kids
Right.
in a Christian home.
Mhm.
What should a Christian home be like?
Yeah.
Should it be one dominated by law, or should it be one really that's dominated by grace and the gospel?
Mm-hmm.
And it's an error that parents fall into because they want to raise good Christians.
Right.
But what we don't want to do is make them think that they are good Christians because they behave a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
or they obey their parents and they keep the laws of the house and they do this, and that makes them a Christian.
Yeah.
And that can happen on accident, I think, and it does happen on accident a lot.
Right.
That's the impression that kids get
Mm-hmm.
that are raised in Christian homes.
Yeah.
This is about keeping rules and keeping laws.
And I think a lot of that it's traced back to the parents. That why do we want our kids to obey? Because I have to catch myself in this also, because I will discipline my kids or punish, which there's a difference between punish and discipline. It's because they've inconvenienced me.
Mm.
They've done something that interferes with what I want to do.
Mm.
And so I want them to obey the rules because I'm selfish.
Mm.
I think we can do this. I'm sure moms can identify with this, being at the store and your kid is acting like a fool. And why do you discipline your kid? It's not because you're trying to get your kid to obey from the heart. It's because you don't want to be embarrassed because people are seeing that your kid is acting like a complete
That's a good
monster.
One. That's a good illustration. Yeah.
So I think that if we examine our own hearts, then we'll see that maybe the ways that we interact with our kids are more about what's going on in our hearts rather than what we want going on in our kids' hearts.
That's
And
really
so
good.
so for a parent to discipline correctly, it begins with the heart of the parent.
Mm-hmm.
We need to repent of our own sins and what's going on in our own hearts. And
Yeah.
then that will work out in the way that we raise our children also.
That's good advice. Yeah, that's very good advice. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that the law doesn't have a place. And the law has a correct place in the Christian home.
Mm.
And I said that, the first thing you should teach your kids is the law. It's one of the very first things. I mean, like, where's it at in the catechism?
It's not too far. I mean,
Yeah.
you get theology proper about God,
Mhm.
Scripture, then it works its way into
Yeah.
the law.
But you don't want to teach your kids the 10 Commandments and give the impression that if they are obeying all of these things, that makes them a good person and a righteous person,
Mm.
and the home's functioning well, and they're obedient, and they're not rebellious. Great, the law did its job. No, you want to teach your kids the 10 Commandments at a very young age because they're going to break them all the time. They're going to break them like all the time, every day. And every time your kid breaks the commandment, like as you go to discipline them, that you should go to them with the gospel.
Yeah.
And how what they have just demonstrated and shown once again is their inability to do what is required by God.
Yeah.
But that sets up the good news, because
Right.
there is one who has perfectly obeyed this law, and salvation is found in him. So
Yeah.
they're getting the gospel all the time.
Yeah.
So that's not a guarantee that your child is going to grow up and be obedient to the gospel and become a Christian, but they won't leave your home not knowing what it is.
Yeah.
Right? They'll know what it is.
Right.
And that's I think our duty and our obligation to our to our children as parents is that when they leave, they know for sure what the gospel is. They were raised in a gospel home. They're not going to point their fingers back and say, my parents were legalist.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. I think a good place to look is also the Sermon on the Mount, reading Matthew 5-7, because Jesus is unpacking the right application of the law. And he's saying, you've heard, don't murder.
Right.
But I say to you, he's not getting rid of don't murder.
Right.
He's saying just because you don't murder doesn't mean that you're keeping the law.
Right.
The problem is what's going on in your heart.
Right.
don't commit adultery, divorce, oaths, things like that. And he's getting at the heart of it.
Right.
By the time he gets to the end of the Sermon on the Mount, he gives this illustration of many will come and say, Lord, Lord, didn't we do all of these things?
Right.
And he'll say, I never knew you.
Yeah.
So he's getting at the heart of the problem is that you need a new heart. You need the one who's giving the Sermon on the Mount to save you. I was thinking, you were given the illustration of parents and their kids. I was thinking also of my own struggles as a pastor, of the wanting, feeling the need to put on some kind of outward show. And I need to guard against those things in my own heart.
Yeah.
It's really easy to put on hypocrisy.
Right.
Really.
Right.
Like I'm conforming to these outward standards, but what's going on inside of my heart? Because really easy to get proud, selfish, lazy. Like those are all things that people may not see going on in my heart. They'll just see that veneer of righteousness. And so guarding against that in my own heart.
Right. It is far easier to fake this, fake it. Like a non-believer can obey strict laws and rules.
Right.
But they do it in Islam. They abstain from drinking and drugs and sex outside of marriage, and they've got a whole list of rules they follow.
Right.
So same thing with like practicing Jews.
Yeah.
Like Orthodox Jews.
Uh-huh.
That doesn't make you a righteous person,
Right.
according to God.
Mm-hmm.
Not if your heart's not been changed, and your heart can only be changed by the gospel.
Yeah.
And the giving of the Spirit.
Yeah.
And so we don't want our kids especially to be able to look at you and say, because your kids know you and your spouse knows you, right? Hey, look, they put on a good show as a Christian, but I really know them. And that doesn't connect. That's one reason I think kids leave the faith when they grow up.
They can see through it.
They see through it,
Yeah.
and they leave Christianity when they grow up.
Yeah, and you asked our congregation, because we got a lot of people that came out of IFB churches, fundamentalist backgrounds. You came from a kind of a fundamentalist background growing up.
I think
even coming from a Southern Baptist church, I came from that really strict kind of fundamentalist background. There were a lot of things that I was not allowed to do.
Yeah, my parents grew up even more. So a lot of these things I talk about, I'm sure they could identify more than me. For me, it was mainly no drinking and no drugs.
Yeah. Possibly
no tattoos.
I don't know if maybe drugs should be included on that list. Maybe that's something you shouldn't do anyway.
Yeah. Well, no drinking, no drugs.
Those fundamentalists think that you can't be a Christian and do drugs.
Yeah, no nicotine. Maybe is a better way to talk about it.
Yeah, no smoking.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's kind of how I grew up, right? You did smoking, you're doing drugs.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like the same thing.
Uh-huh.
But I absorbed it. I can't even remember them ever sitting me down and saying this, right? But it is the impression I got. But I did get some. It's not just us, though, because I remember my dad telling me the Baptist jokes. Which I won't. I'm not going to share the one that everybody wants me to reshare.
I'm pretty sure you've shared it on here before.
I think I have. Yeah. It's the one. People laughed when I said it.
My kids, my 12-year-old and 11-year-old were like, "What was the joke? What was the joke?" So thank you so much.
Yeah. Did you tell them?
No, I didn't tell them.
Okay. Then I won't retell it on here, but I'll tell another that my dad told me. It's a real one. It's a good one.
Okay.
Because one thing that I could see, right, at least in the way that I grew up, is that people kind of grew up in the, I guess, the Pentecostal world. They did believe that these things were taboo and not good. Yeah. But they didn't do them when no one was around. At least they had a consistency about it. Yeah. But it was the Baptists who were blatant hypocrites. And I could see that from a young age. So my dad has this hilarious story. He says, when you go fishing, why do you always take two Baptists?
Yeah, I've heard this one.
And
it's a good one.
Why, Dad? And he's like, because if you only take one, they'll drink all your beer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But if you got two of them there, they won't drink.
Right.
And so the dancing one is related to that. You can ask your mom and dad about it, or you can ask me You can ask me privately about it, and I'll be glad to share that joke with you. But like 75% of the congregation laughed about when I said I got a joke about dancing.
Yeah, most of them probably
and
know
I guess they heard
They
it.
probably
already.
have. You've probably had. They probably heard you tell it,
Yeah,
or your dad. Maybe your dad's going around telling this joke.
yeah, maybe it's it's funny. I think so. Last night I was like, I think I'm going to tell this joke on the podcast, and Angie was like, "You know, the joke is not actually about dancing, right?" That's what she said. So I was like, you're right. Maybe
Yeah,
maybe I shouldn't tell that joke
Yeah,
on the podcast.
I appreciate Angie for reeling you in, because I don't do a very good job of it.
Yeah, so I asked the congregation, I was like, hey, a lot of them grew up independent fundamentalist Baptist.
Yeah.
And there are others who kind of grew up maybe in a legalistic, charismatic stuff. I was like, give me a list, if you guys would share with us stories of you growing up where it was strongly implied, right, that if you did these things, you weren't a Christian,
Yeah.
or if you didn't do certain things, you also weren't a Christian.
Mhm.
So I'm looking for things that aren't even talked about in the Bible. That it was really, you were really brought up with, like, this is a law of God, and if you don't do it, you're not a Christian. And there were a lot. There was a lot.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's the standard ones.
Yeah.
Drinking,
Yeah.
tattoos, smoking.
Yeah.
But you got some pretty funny ones.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of them was, and I hadn't heard of people going to church on Friday night. I've heard of Sunday, Wednesday night. Like, you're not a real Christian if you don't go to church on Sunday and Wednesday and Friday. I'd never heard
And
of
Friday,
And
yeah.
Friday night. Yeah,
Right,
that's
yeah.
a...
Now,
That's
I grew up, and I mean, it's still part of me that we went to church pretty much any time.
Yeah, rock and roll is the devil.
Rock and roll.
That's what...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I grew up, like, we went Sunday morning,
Yeah.
Sunday night, Wednesday night. Like, if there was stuff during the week, yeah, we'd always go to that.
Mhm.
Yep.
No pants for girls actually appeared.
Unless they're culottes.
Culotte. What is a
Unless they're
culotte?
culottes. They're,
Is it like a dress pants?
let me see if I can find
Is it like what Michael Todd was wearing? Is that a culotte? Oh. I really don't. I've heard the name culottes, but
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
They're kind of like capri pants.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
We'll have to check it out.
Okay. Well, if
No
you
going
if
to-
you were in an IFB church, you know what culottes are.
Yeah. No going to the theaters.
Uh-huh.
No reading Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Was that a thing for you?
My mom was a library assistant in an elementary school,
Uh-huh.
and she read the first 4, and then she warned me about the rest of them because they get progressively darker.
Okay.
So the more lighthearted stuff was okay, but the darker stuff but it was kind of subjective.
Mm-hmm. Here's one I just thought of that nobody mentioned. No playing with Pokemon. You
Yeah.
ever hear of that?
Uh-huh. I've heard of
Especially that one where you try to go around town and capture the Pokemon virtually.
that. Yeah.
That's those demons.
My playing Magic the Gathering,
Mhm.
the card game.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was out of bounds for me. I remember Julia telling a story of her grandmother coming to visit, and her grandmother was Catholic, and they were playing maybe spades, like cards.
Huh.
And my mother-in-law, I guess, closed the blinds,
Mm.
and her grandmother asked if it was because they weren't supposed to be playing cards, but it really was because there was like the sun shining.
Oh, card playing is one. Yeah.
No card playing. No.
Yeah. This one caught me off guard. I'm gonna be honest. No Little House on the Prairie.
That is a weird one.
Yeah.
That's a really weird one. I'd never heard that one before.
That is some
growing up-
That's some legalism right there. buddy.
Growing up, watched a lot of Little House on the Prairie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No watching He-Man, kind of linked to the other no watchings.
I had some people asking me if I could watch He-Man. I watched He-Man all the time, but I could not have Castle Grayskull.
Okay.
Couldn't have Castle.
What about
Grayskull.
the Smurfs? Have you heard of someone
I've
not being
heard
allowed to
people
watch
say
Smurfs?
that they couldn't watch the Smurfs. Yeah.
Of course, there's the no dancing, no public school, no holding hands. I think that one is. I guess when
No
we grew up,
PDA.
it's kind of a
No
big
PDA.
deal, yeah.
Yeah.
No holding hands, no rock music, as we said, no piercings.
Mhm.
And here's an interesting one: no watching Star Trek.
Yeah.
We watched Star Trek all the time when I was growing up. Did you?
Yeah.
But I guess they're like demons or
Demons,
something.
yeah.
And people are like these aliens are demons.
Aliens are really demons.
I don't know, but that one was interesting. No doing show choir on Sunday night.
Okay.
I guess because Sunday
It would
night
take place of church.
Sunday night church, maybe.
Yeah.
Drinking alcohol is actually legit from the devil, which is a weird one to me, especially like after studying through the Bible. And
Yeah, you can't get that from reading the Old or the New Testament.
now it can take you places that you don't want to go.
Right.
obviously,
There's obviously plenty of warnings against drunkenness,
Yeah.
but just drinking alcohol, calling it from the devil when it's actually viewed as like a blessing in the
Right.
prophets.
Yeah. That wine is a blessing from the Lord. Yeah. And so we draw like this extra hedge around.
Yes.
Don't get drunk. Well,
Don't get drunk, so don't
don't
drink
and
at
you'll
all.
never get drunk.
Yeah.
No smoking, of course, but smoking's kind of fallen out today, I guess. Maybe it's vaping now. I don't know. No vaping.
Yeah.
And of course, no Calvinism.
Yeah.
That's of the devil.
Yeah.
That just scratches the surface, right, of all the kinds of extra
Your had Facebook memory. Do you look at your Facebook memories
occasionally.
Occasionally. A couple of days ago was the one where you posted about all the slander around town, where they were calling us Catholics right after we'd done a 500-year Reformation celebration.
Right. Well, we say sin makes you stupid, George.
It does. Yeah, it absolutely does. Yeah.
So the list.
I could never watch Simpsons.
Okay.
Simpsons.
I can see that because he's pretty disrespectful to his parents.
Yeah.
He's kind of sharp tongue. To his
I
parents.
couldn't watch PG-13 movies until I was like 16.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not like that with my kids. My kind of rule, as I told you, is like I kind of draw the line on like the sex stuff for my kids.
Yeah.
But
language, I try to shield them a little bit from like really bad language.
Yeah.
But like PG-13 movies, we watch like Marvel movies and stuff.
Yeah.
It's balance, right? Like you don't want them to. I don't want them to watch. I mean, I've still got fairly young kids. I don't want them to see like a lot of violence. But at the same time, it's like He-Man,
right?
You know.
Yeah. So these kind of lists, why I wanted them is because I think what they show is there is a propensity to think that if we have all of these kind of lists and rules that aren't even spelled out in the Bible, that makes us righteous, that it makes us
right. Before we move on, I do want to make a little caveat. Parents are responsible for raising their own kids,
right?
And so if you have rules that are different from other parents, that's okay.
And you don't anathematize.
It's okay.
You don't get to anathematize other families.
Yeah.
They don't follow
Well,
your
don't.
rules.
I mean, don't. I mean, we're laughing about it here, but if there are parents that don't want their kids to watch PG-13 movies, that's okay. Like God has given you the responsibility to raise your kids,
right?
So don't take this as us like laughing behind your back. Look at these prudes.
Right.
Like you do have the responsibility to raise your kids the way that you think that they should be raised. But the point still remains the same, that external rule following will not change a person's heart.
Yes, exactly.
And so you don't want to become so rigid in outward rule keeping that you miss the fact that your kid needs a new heart. Right.
Yeah,
I
and I
mean,
like that
you
caveat
want
that
to
you
aim.
gave.
You want to aim towards that. Well, I
It's-
don't want people to feel.
It is a good
I
caveat.
don't want people to come away feeling like ostracized because they have rules. I mean, every family is going to be different, and some people are going to be more relaxed with rules than others, and some of those rules are okay.
And there may-
I don't understand the little house on the prairie rule.
I don't either. But
I'll be
there-
honest with that. But if that's how you want to raise your kids, I mean, they're your kids, right?
Well, there may be reasons for some of these rules.
Right.
So if a person is not like saying, we don't drink alcohol because that pleases God, right? That is what pleases him is to totally abstain from alcohol.
Right.
And that if you don't, you're a subclass of Christian.
Right.
But maybe they're saying to their children, we don't drink alcohol. It's off limits completely. Maybe they come from a family of generations of alcoholics
Right.
that had totally destroyed their family for generations. And now
Right.
you got one guy who broke that cycle, and he teaches his children, don't drink.
Yep.
We have a problem in our family.
Mhm.
Don't touch it.
Yeah.
Right? So, but what we don't want to do is tell them, hey, we don't drink because that pleases God.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
parents got their reasons for doing things with
Right.
their kids, and that's their business.
Right. Yeah.
As long as we aren't teaching them that this makes you a Christian,
Right with God.
then we're okay.
Right. Yeah.
Because we are transformed, as we saw, from the inside out by the
Right.
Spirit.
Right.
And in a strange way, if you think about this, at the beginning source of this, we are to look for an external means of justification.
Mm.
Whereas the world thinks we self-justify.
Yeah.
They've got it backwards, right? We self-justify, but the external justification comes from our alien righteousness of Christ. That righteousness of Christ comes outside of us and is imputed into us.
Mhm.
But then when we have it, we're justified by faith in Christ. Our righteousness emerges from that relationship with the Spirit
Yeah.
and not from external conformities to laws.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Very good. Good conversation. Hopefully that's been helpful as we've been trying to apply some of this to real life.
Yeah.
Okay. So next week we will pick up with verse 7.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
All right.
Indeed.
Well,
Alrighty.
Okay. Well, hope this has been beneficial for you. Hope it's been an enjoyable conversation to listen into. If you have any questions or comments, make sure to post those. We'll sometimes look at them. Do you look at those comments, Jay? I'm really bad.
Yeah,
I'm really bad at
occasionally
it.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
as
right.
a
I'm really
mother.
bad at it.
Yeah.
You got to let me know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, make sure to like, subscribe, share. We hope you have a good week. We'll see you next time. God bless.